And good afternoon and welcome. My name is Ryan Belmore. I am the owner and publisher of What's Up Newp, and we're going to bring people on here. And good morning, Mr. President.
How you doing, Ryan?
I'm doing all right, and you can hear me. I can hear you.
What a country.
What a country it is indeed. And what we're going to do is this is the first of our series where we are catch up with the Newport City Council candidates, and there's a whole bunch of them. But before we even get started with that, what I want to do is spend a few minutes just reminding people of some important information, and that is here. We have a statewide primary coming up on Tuesday, September 8th, and the voter registration deadline has passed, but the mail ballot application is August 18th. Very important to know for the presidential primary, everybody was mailed out a mail ballot that is registered to vote. This one, if you want a mail ballot, if you do not want to go to the polls, you have to request a mail ballot by August 18th, which is next Tuesday. So very important information. And then, of course, the general election will be on Tuesday, November 3rd, and you can see those dates there. vote.sos.ri.gov for all of that information. You can even see find a polling place, view sample ballot here. And one of the important things I'll note is, for example, everybody in Newport will have a reason to go to the polls on September 8th because there will be a primary for Newport City Council. And Newport City Council will be narrowing it down from 12 candidates down to 8 candidates. And then
that's for the at-large seats.
At the at-large seats. And then you Ward 3 voters will also be narrowing it down from 3 candidates to 2 candidates. And let's bring our guest on here today. Councilor Justin McLaughlin is there, and you are there. Can you hear us, Justin?
I can. Thank you very much.
Did I get all of that right?
You did. But I'm not Nellie Popea, so I would ask her to make sure you were absolutely right.
It's okay. The important thing is people may think this primary, well, they might just, it's kind of in the middle of summer. Now it's going to be before school starts. It's important that you go and vote at the primary, no matter what town, wherever you live. There is some reason to go to the primary, to the polls. So we're going to start off our series here today, and Justin is lucky where he gets to kick this off for us. So we hopefully we do this all right. And what we're going to do is we thought it'd be fun and interesting and informative to give candidates for Newport City Council an opportunity to answer a series of questions, take as long as they need to answer those questions. And hopefully what people can do is get a good sense of each candidate. Each candidate has enough time to answer their questions rather than the normal 1-minute forums. Of course, you can always take 1 minute if you'd like. But I thought it was important that we do it this way. And, sometimes things get lost in other ways of doing things, whether it's a survey or a forum, etc. So it's kind of a, let's get to know Justin. Let's get to know what Justin thinks. Let's get to know how Justin governs. Now, of course, Justin, you've been on City Council, but we're going to kick off in case people are just tuning in, just moved to Newport. Tell us a little bit about yourself as well as why you're rerunning for Newport City Council.
Sure. I guess I could do the 30-second elevator speech. I came to Newport in 1983, so I've lived here almost 36 years. Been a homeowner for 35 of those years. I worked for the Naval Embassy Warfare Center until I retired in 2004. And to be quite honest, I wasn't as involved in the community as I probably should have been, but I chalked that up to being a workaholic, working in intelligence-related tasks. So whenever I needed to go back to work, I wasn't in the community. I was back at work. But once I retired, I got involved. And so in 2006, when an opportunity to run to fill a vacant seat in the 2nd Ward came up, I leapt at that opportunity. I was elected to 4 terms at large, representing the 2nd Ward. And then after those, I ran it at large in 2000, and I got to get these dates right, 2014, and I was elected. In 2016, the voters of Newport decided I needed a vacation, I was 185 votes shy of winning a seat on the at-large on the council. So I spent the next 2 years in the wilderness. Although my wife would tell you we had a wonderful time traveling. We probably spent almost 3 months traveling in those 2 years. So there was life after the council. But in 2018, there was a point when I thought, gee, maybe only 4 people are going to run at large, and that shouldn't happen that way. So I threw my hat in the ring. Ultimately, there were 7 people that ran, and I was fortunate to be one of the 4 top vote getters, and consequently, I've had the honor of sitting on a council with 6 women. So I was the only guy that won that year. So in a nutshell, my life started in Massachusetts in 1943, and I've been in the Navy. I've lived overseas. I worked for the Navy for 38 years before I retired. But I'm glad I'm in Newport, and I had the chance to go to Washington in 1990 and decided that Newport was far better place to live than Washington was, and I'm glad I stayed. So.
Excellent. And I'm sure many of us, of course, anybody who's serving, we thank them for their service, and we're glad you stayed as well. And I'll say that for everybody that's on the council, everybody that's on the school committee, anybody that's in government office. Oftentimes it's a thankless job. So we appreciate your service.
I would jump back in because I didn't answer part of your question, and that is, why am I running this year? And, I want to tell an anecdote. In 1966, I was teaching school in Boston, but my draft board had told me that they might have to find a job for me. And as a result, I applied for officer candidate school in the Navy. And in December of 1966, I got 2 letters, one from my draft board telling me, "You're a teacher now, we're giving you deferment." And one from the Navy saying, "You're accepted. Show up at OCS in June of 1966. Actually, that was in 65. I took the Navy part. I thought it was a duty, a matter of duty. Duty motivates me a lot in life. And serving on the council, that's a duty. It's a responsibility. It's not mine. It's offering myself to the community to help them by making good decisions for the community. So I offer myself again because I've got 12 years of experience on the council, and I think those 12 years can be valuable as we move forward to deal with issues that we'll face in the next 2 years. And if the community so sees, I hope that they'll say, "We need your experience, and we're glad you're still offering yourself to serve."
Frank, did you have any follow-ups before we dive into?
Really, one of the things that I like about Justin's resume is he spent 4 years in a place that someday I hope to visit, and that's Iceland. Is it as good as I think it is?
It's a beautiful country. It absolutely. But I saw it snow in every month but July, so you should be aware of that. And in the wintertime, you could read a newspaper outside throughout the month of June and July. And in the winter, you watch the sun rise as you were driving home for lunch at 11:30. So it has its strange elements, but it was a beautiful country.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you're in Newport and serving the city of Newport.
Excellent. So we'll get started here, and I guess Frank, go ahead and take it away.
Sure. So a number of questions we had, and we put them out to you first, so you had an opportunity to be able to think about those a little bit. So I guess our first question is, what steps should the city take to prevent COVID-19 outbreaks? And I know that it's hard for the city to prevent them, but what and how should the city enforce restrictions that have been placed on by the state and perhaps the federal government?
Well, I would actually, if somebody would answer my prayers, I would look to leadership from the top. I'd go right to the White House and on down, which unfortunately we're not being provided that leadership from the very top. But the people like Anthony Fauci are certainly helping us understand the issue and what our responsibilities are. And in the state of Rhode Island, the governor has done a fantastic job of responding to this. So, I mean, that puts it in the context. In the city itself, I was out at City Hall just a few days ago, and I saw a sign on the side of I think, a trash receptacle, but it said face mask mandated or mandatory. I think today where we are in Newport is very good. The governor gave us a shout out the other day because she thinks we're doing a good job down here. All things considered, I think we're seeing a good compliance rate with face mask wearing and social distancing downtown. It's not perfect, and the governor acknowledges that, but it's a challenge, and I think we're seeing good results. My only wish would be, I wish we had started doing on Memorial Day weekend what we're doing today. So we've evolved to what I think is a pretty good place with regard to telling people that we want them to wear masks, the signage, the volunteers that are passing out masks and cards downtown. All of these things are good things. And I won't complain about the fact we didn't do some of them as soon as we might have done them. Those are lessons learned, but I think we're in a good place today, and I think we're doing a good job, and we're paying attention to it. We had a briefing from the city manager every week about how things are going. All things considered, 130 cases in Newport is relatively low compared to the rest of the state, and it may be reflective of the fact that we're doing things to control it here in the city.
Justin, I just want to follow up on a point that comes to mind, and that's the schools. Where now the opening has been delayed by a couple of weeks. There's been a lot of controversy over whether or not it should be in person or should be remote. You have any thoughts on that? Do you have any concerns about kids going back into school and maybe the rate of the virus increases?
I don't want to make it sound like I don't want to answer your question, but we have a school committee, and that's really going to be their responsibility. And I don't want to begin to second guess them. I do follow this on a daily basis, both at the national and at the local and the state level. This is such a hard challenge. It's not obvious that there's a right answer. It's going to require people to make decisions that they may have to change in a very short order. I think as a member of the city council, what I should do is be prepared to support the school committee to the extent that they need support from the city. And if that means money, I mean, the city needs to be prepared to ensure that the schools have the funds they need to observe the protocols and the paradigm that they decide is the right one for our community as we try to educate our students. And I think the governor recognizes that. And I think she set aside $50 million for the schools to use to deal with this. But I, as a counselor, am prepared to work with the school committee to the extent that they come to us and ask us for additional resources.
And you want to take the next?
Justin, what can we do to improve these cities' economic recovery during and after the pandemic? Of course, we don't know when this is going to end. We've heard a year since the beginning, and it looks like we're aiming for at least through the winter here. What are some ideas you have as a current council member or as a future council member to aid the city's economic recovery? Well,
we have different economies in Newport, and so as a former employee of Newark, I could point out that Newark's continuing to work, and all of the people that work for Newark continue to work and get paid. There are lots of people in Newport who are continuing to work and are, they're part of an economy which needs to be vital and dynamic if we want to get back to normal. But as we all know, tourism is a very important part of that component here in Newport, and it's been really difficult. Now, I think the city has done a good job in providing to restaurants where it was possible the opportunity to use public space. I frankly hope that we can go and keep some of that in place afterwards, because the way Broadway is being used today, to me, is probably the way it should have been done from the very beginning. But we've learned some lessons. But we've been flexible. But on the other hand, the restaurateurs would probably tell you we make our money with alcohol. It's the governor's regulations who are basically putting a squeeze on the ability to serve alcohol in a bar-like environment. But I think what the city can do is, just be prepared to be as flexible as possible where we can, in fact, be flexible, but to a very large extent, this is not in our control. And yet, I asked Joe, how are the cars coming across the Newport Bridge? And last Wednesday night, he said, on July 4th, it was 104% of what it was last July 4th. So I think we're going to find that in some ways, the city has not done as badly as it might have done, given the constraints that were imposed at the governor's level, at the state level. So the city doesn't exactly have millions of dollars to pump into the economy. So I don't have any specific ideas where we can make an investment other than to be prepared to do what we can with regard to the environment that we can control, our own regulations and ordinances. And I think the city manager, under the emergency authority granted to him by the council, can do whatever is needed on very short notice. I mean, if Joe thinks of something that needs to be done today, he can do it today. He'll keep us informed, but he doesn't have to get a council meeting to get us to act. So I just hope we continue to do that.
Justin, if I can do a follow-up, I virtually attend every city council meeting.
We know you're there.
And, a couple times you have brought up that, the city manager has been the boss, has been in charge under the emergency order here for a couple months. And a couple of times you have brought up that, it's the city council's job to do some of those things. And you brought up that you would like to see the city council take that back over. Is that still your stance, or has that changed over time?
One can hold two thoughts at the same time and find them both compatible. It is what it is with respect to the council's desire to continue to allow the city manager to operate under the authority they've granted to him. And I have no problem with that. But I also wouldn't have no problem, and I would have preferred if we would have met more often in person, and we had not necessarily continued those emergency powers, because I don't see where they've actually been critical. But I'm a member of a council, so I can express my opinion. And one of the things I like about the council is you can explain to your fellow councilors how you feel about something, and then we take a vote. And then if you're a really good councilor, you don't go home to complain about what's been decided, you support it. And so I support what we're doing, but at the same time, I look forward to when the council goes back to in-person meetings, and not that we're going to take over the job of the city manager, but is seen as a more active player.
Justin, I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit. It's in this environment, unfortunately, a lot of really crucial issues get buried because we have so many different issues as a result of COVID, Black Lives Matter, all of those things that somehow push some other issues aside. I wanted to ask about climate change and the city of Newport, which is clearly climate change is a concern to Newport. What's happening, and how should policymakers deal with that in terms of the city? What are the things we need to be aware of?
Well, the first thing we need to be aware of is that it's real, whether it's sea level rise or climate change. They're all related in one way or another. And clearly, a couple of weeks ago, when we had almost 3 inches of rain in 40 minutes, we certainly saw what can happen when you get a lot of a severe weather event. And the scientists will tell you, you should expect more of those. What might have been a 25-year storm may be something that happens every month as we move forward, and we'll have to redefine what we mean by extreme events. The city has made investments to deal with some of the consequences of this, the tidal gates that we've installed in the point section to deal with flooding. We're going to do the same thing down in the Wellington area. I think we've come up with some good ideas, and we've implemented them, and we're working on identifying other areas. But at some level, this is bigger than us. I don't know that we can build a dike around Newport to keep us safe from sea level rising as time goes on. It's an existential problem, but it isn't necessarily one that's going to stress us this week or next week. But if we don't lay the foundation to deal with the problems as we go forward, and if we don't do what we can do now so that later on we don't have to do everything all at once, then we're making a mistake. I think we're doing those things. And, there was a lot of water in the streets a couple of weeks ago when it rained as heavily as it did. And yet there was no CSO. There was no combined sewer overflow, which in years in the past, if it rained half an inch, there would have been a CSO. That's a consequence of the investment that we've made into our stormwater and our sewer system. Unfortunately, the water's not going into the sewer system because it's going into the storm systems, and our storm system is still stressed by an event like that, and that's why you saw what looked like a river down in front of the fire station on Marlborough Street and America's Cup Avenue. But being aware that it's a problem and having the public service director work on identifying problems and having a council that knows this is something we need to revisit on a regular basis and ask, what is it we're doing and what could we be doing, is probably what we should be doing now. Yeah.
And, Frank touched base on it a little bit there when he mentioned Black Lives Matter. And obviously it is, along with COVID, if we were ranking them, this was probably going to be the second biggest story of the year, is the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't think it could outbeat COVID, but it may. But our question is, do you believe systematic racism is a problem in the city? And does the state need to address? If so, how?
I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago, and I came across a term I wasn't familiar with. It was called intersectional identities, or intersectionality. And intersectionality it's a theoretical framework that read a little bit about this, but for understanding how aspects of a person's social, political identities, gender, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, ability, physical appearance, height, etc., might combine to create unique modes of discrimination and privilege. And I shared that with my colleagues, and I'll share it with anybody, because it helps to explain why you can't say, well, everything I have, I earned myself. That's like claiming I built the Pell Bridge because when I drive across it, I'm not dependent upon other people that help build the Pell Bridge, or any of the many things that government provides. I'm such an advantaged person. I had two parents who valued education, and when I was 18, there wasn't much else for me to do except go to college, and I was encouraged to do that. And I had the opportunity to become an officer in the Navy, and I had the opportunity to build on that. So many of these things started out because I had two parents who themselves were a doctor and a nurse. There are advantages that have accrued to me that, you can begin to forget about that, but you need to remind yourself that you've had those advantages, and then you have to look somewhere else and say, but that kid over there, his father's in jail. So when it comes time for him to go to college, he doesn't have two parents who are supporting him. And we can go down that road and identify many, many, many examples of how people are being disadvantaged, not because of things that they've done, but to be quite frankly, because their ancestors were put on ships in Angola and taken to South Carolina and sold 400 years ago. And we're nowhere close to dealing with the consequences of what was a terrible process. Mankind should be. I almost sometimes think that God is punishing us with the problems we have some days because of the things that we have done before as a nation. And we've got a lot of work to do to overcome those things. And the first step is educating ourselves and understanding it. And that is not going to be easy because a lot of people just don't understand it. And I'm going to go right back to the White House, because if you do not have leadership from the president with respect to a major problem in your country, it's hard to then deal with it because it provides license to people to say, oh, that's not a problem. If Black people are in jail, that's because they committed crimes. It doesn't talk to the fact that they lived in socioeconomic environments which made it very difficult for them. And that's a consequence of things that they wouldn't have chosen if they'd had a choice. So it's whether it's education, job opportunities, or as we have found out this year, health. You know, diversity people are struck by COVID at a much higher rate than white people. So even at the health level, we realize there are inequities, and we just, you know, there's no single solution. But the first thing we should do is acknowledge that this is a problem and be prepared to do what can be done as we move along. And as I said when we talked about the education for the kids in the high school about African American history, I said, we need to push this out into the community. We need their parents to know. We all need to know what the history is of a consequence of slavery in this country. And only then can we actually really seriously begin to work on what needs to be done.
I want to bring it back to Newport because that's as you've described it, is really the overall problem in our country. What is the situation in Newport? What can the city council do in terms of that education? I throw a personal belief in is that, you know, we have these statues of white American heroes all over the place, but not very many statues of Black American heroes all over the place. Are there things that the city can do that we don't have to wait for a White House?
So, well, supporting our educational system is clearly one of the things we need to do. But as the school committee last night discussed, you know, looking into this problem and coming up with a policy, you know, having an understanding that a teacher who subtly suggests to one student that you should go to college and to another, well, you should join the Navy, which may be racially based, and the teacher doesn't understand what they're doing. So, I mean, in our own community, when you say, what can the council do? I mean, as a human being, as an individual, I have a responsibility to help contribute to that understanding. You know, I don't have a short list of things the council is going to adopt as resolutions moving forward. I think the first thing the council needs to do is come to a better understanding of what the challenge is. You know, I have no objections to putting up public recognition of the contributions that have been made by African Americans to our country and to Newport. I mean, 20% of the population in Newport in 1750 was African American. Most of them were slaves. We could start out by bringing to Newport's attention, you know, their own history. You know, the anti-abolitionists were very strong in Newport because of their interconnection by marriage and business with people in South Carolina and Georgia. We've got a history we need to become aware of so that we can deal with it. But Frank, I don't have a short list. You know, I don't have a list of 6 people that we should put up, but we should be open to doing things as they come forward, and we should be willing to work with community groups to identify what can be done.
I'm gonna just switch gears slightly. One of the big issues out there is affordable housing, and as we take a look at Newport, how do we make Newport a more attractive place in which to live and an affordable place in which to live?
I have a little bit of prejudice when you talk about that. I think it's a pretty neat place to live, and when I compare it to a lot of other places in the world, I'm glad I'm here. So from an attractive standpoint, I realize there may be some areas where improvements need to be made, but by and large, I think Newport's a pretty attractive and pretty nice place to live. When it comes to affordable housing, and don't take this as snarky or cynical, but I've never met somebody who wasn't willing to sell their house for $200,000 or $300,000 more than it was worth. And that is what's happened in Newport. You know, my joke has been going back 20 years that people who couldn't get a dinner reservation in the Hamptons or Newport would come to Newport with $1 million and buy a $500,000 house with it. And as a result, that house is now worth $1 million. There's a pressure on housing values in this city that is being created by capitalism. It's being created by, gee, you want to buy my house? I'll sell it to you. The house behind me, supposedly, is just sold for a totally irrational amount of money. I can't wait to see what my valuation will be next year. And it's, you know, I've seen this just creep down streets as people buy this house and that house. And unfortunately, it just continues to expand. When a member of city staff decided to move to Portsmouth 10 or so years ago and sold his house on Eustis to a woman from New York who just wanted a pied-à-terre for weekends in the summer, you knew that there's something going on here. And I don't know what we could create in law that could prevent people from selling their houses for what they want to sell them for. So I don't have any good answer to the question as to how to control that in the city. It's almost as if the horses left the barn and we're trying to put them back into the barn. You didn't ask it, but we have the lowest tax rate in the state when we make adjustments for the fact that we collect trash and we have a fire department and a police department and everything else. And people say, oh no, the taxes are too high. What's too high is the valuation of their property. So instituting a homestead exemption could work toward making their property more affordable for them to live in, but it's not going to change the overall value of their property, which is in the past driven how much they had to pay in taxes. So the homestead exemption, which people have talked about for many, many years, and is now being investigated seriously by the administration, is something that could address affordability to live here, but it isn't necessarily going to change the property valuation. At least I don't think it's going to change property valuations. And the reality is nobody wants their house to be worth less than it is. And in some ways, the responsibility of the city council, and I've always thought of this personally, is, my job is to make sure that we don't do anything to diminish the value of your property, whether you live in a $200,000 house or a $2 million house. I want Newport to be the place that people want to live, and where the value of in most people's lives, the most important asset they have doesn't diminish because somehow Newport becomes less attractive to live.
It's a good segue is, of course, when we talk about affordability as well as attractive, as well as home prices, we have to talk about families coming and going out of the city and whether families can be here. And of course, in order for families to be here, their children need to be educated. So, we're going to slide over here to the education, and probably something that's kind of been lost throughout COVID is, what are your thoughts on the school bond question coming up in November? Do you support it? And if not, or if the bond fails, what should the city do to address the school building needs? Of course, those needs are at Rogers High School as well as Pell Elementary School.
The reason the school bond is on the ballot is because this is a question that transcends the authority of the school committee and the city council. So you may want to know, well, how are you going to vote on it, Justin? That's not what's important. What's important in this instance, because this is one of the few times when the residents get to decide what it is they want to do, and we'll do what they decide. I've been an advocate of regionalization. I think that the regionalization part of this equation wasn't necessarily as robustly explored during the roll up to the bond question on the ballot. But I'm also a realist, and that just may not be something that's going to work out. But I think if we'd actually been more structured in the way we approached it, I think that Newport and Middletown could do a better job building one school for the two communities. It would cost less in the long run. It would provide more educational opportunities. It would provide one hell of a football team that we should have invested more effort in that. But this is a question that the voters have to decide. And if the voters, I wish it had been two bond questions. Pell's a no-brainer. They need the space. They need it now. The price is right, and it would have passed, but they wanted it on one question, and so they're together now. And, that's not something I would have wanted, but I voted because that was the only way both questions were going to get on the ballot. If for any reason the bond fails, I think the city should immediately work to figure out how to pay for the expansion at Pell. It's less than $8 million. And there may be ways that we can do that more quickly than going back to another major bond. For the high school, you got to start over again, but maybe you look at options that you've looked at before and try to look at them from a new perspective. The Thompson Middle School wasn't approved on its first go around. That may have had something to do with the siting. It was going to be built at the Sullivan School site in the North End, and frankly, the community wasn't necessarily ready to do that. So 2 years later, they voted on a bond that was more expensive than the building would have been in the North End. I'm going to interject something here, and that is when we built the Pell School in the North End, we did something that was really, really valuable to this community. You know, we integrated our schools. We didn't just consolidate our schools. As a community, we voted to put all of our students, whatever color or shape or whatever they were, into one place. And I think that was really a dramatic, good step for the city of Newport, and something that I was proud to support. And I think the whole city should be proud of what we've done by building the Pell School. If the bond passes and we build a new high school, you know, I'll just say that's something the community has decided to do, and I'll be glad to see it happen.
So Rogers High School, according to Rhode Island Department of Education, the Jacobs report is the worst school physically in the state. So you come out of this bond issue, if it doesn't succeed, there seems to be some real immediate needs.
I don't disagree, and we voted just last Wednesday to fund some repairs to the Career and Tech Center. But the building itself has to survive for at least 4 more years, no matter what we do. And the class that would start high school this September in Rogers will graduate from Rogers because the new school won't be ready until that class has graduated. So we do need to make an investment in the building. And so, you know, if there's a leaking roof, if there's a temperature problem in a classroom, if there's mold, if there are rodents, all those problems need to be addressed right now. And I'm not suggesting we should keep Rogers online for, you know, another 50 years. But I'm not one of those people who thinks that you'll build a new school and suddenly all your test scores will go up, and the 30% or more of the kids who don't show up at the high school on a regular basis will suddenly run back to school and say, I want to go to high school now because we have a brand new school. I think there are some educational challenges that need to be concurrently worked on and need solutions. And we don't need to wait until we have a new school to deal with those.
Justin, just back to the regionalization for 1 second. You know, there was a couple of meetings where it went in front of Middletown to have a discussion, and Middletown Town Council, the majority of them weren't interested in the discussion. You know, how do you think you get Middletown Town Council to come to the table to have that discussion with Newport?
Well, you know, speaking as just a negotiator, I hate to think of myself as a politician, but, you know, okay, so I'm in politics. There are questions that you don't ask in public if you're really seriously interested in working on a problem. And I think this is, you know, they went to Middletown and they basically said, hey, how about joining us in a regional effort? But the analogy I used is you went and you asked a girl for a date to the prom the day before the prom. You know, if you're really serious about taking this girl to the prom, you would have started talking to her at Christmas time, not the first week in June. So I'm not sure that we went about that in the right way. I don't mean to fault the way people did it, but I wasn't driving that bus. But if I had, I might have started some conversations in the background. I'm a realist, though. I can see where there just weren't 4 votes on the Middletown Council that were probably going to embrace that. But they didn't necessarily make it any easier by bringing it to them in a public forum and just talking about money. To be quite honest, when you go back and you watch that meeting, it's more about the money. You know, we can save lots and lots of money if you'll come and join with us. I think that they spent a little bit of time talking about we can have a better educational paradigm for both your students and our students. if we build a school together. And it's not just the money we'll save building it, but we'll save money operating the school as we move forward. I worked on the committee that involved the superintendents and the members of city councils and school committees, which actually Jean Marie started the membership on it, and I kind of took over from her in 08. But I was involved in that effort back in the 06 to 11, 12 time period, and I know that regionalization has multiple benefits, and people in Newport have voted 65% positive to, consider regionalization. In Middletown, it was like 46%, 45%. So, as a politician, I'd say we just need to get 5% more to be on our side. And I don't know whether that will happen in the future. It will be a disappointment. I grew up in a town the size of Aquidneck Island. All things considered, if Aquidneck Island was one town, and we had one police department, one fire department, one school department, one public services department, it probably would be better for all of us.
Yeah, that's an entirely different discussion, but one that one that's very interesting. We have 39 cities and towns in the state. We have no county governments in the state. Things work differently in other areas. So that's for another day, Justin. But how about if we take a look? I want to drift back to economics just a little bit. Newport relies very heavily on tourism and hospitality as industries, and I think under COVID we've learned that that can be disrupted pretty easily. Are there other areas that the city should be looking at to try and develop that will they're not going to replace tourism and hospitality, but might provide another stable industry for the city?
I think the whole innovation hub effort, which is now going on 5 or 6 years, was intended to identify what might be alternative economic development and jobs. Unfortunately, there's really nothing to show for that. I mean, the Sheffield School Accelerator is off to the side, something that did happen. And I'm not sure that anything really could have happened down on the land where the bridge ramp realignment will be. But we gave a company $500,000 to help give us some ideas, and we were briefed by them 2 or 3 weeks before I lost the election in 2016, and I don't think they've ever been back to brief the council, but they may have been while I was off the council. But there's not much to show for that. There's possibility that as we develop the North End with the North End urban plan that's currently, being worked on, and with the Capianato project, we could develop some new things up there. But Capianato wants to build 2 hotels, which is just tourism, North End tourism. So I want to spend a minute and just put tourism in a perspective as I see it. Now, the first tourists that came to Newport came from South Carolina and Georgia in the 1820s. And they stayed in hotels, and over time they started building some modest cottages. And over time, those cottages got bigger and bigger, and the hotels got bigger and bigger. And we get to the mansions as we see them today. And then these people start building their houses in the south end of the city. In many ways, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property in the south end of the city that are lived in by summer residents are descendants of those early tourists. It's a form of tourism, but it's been institutionalized into residential buildings. They pay an awful lot of our taxes. If those people hadn't built their houses here, our tax rate would have to be a lot higher. And then we get downtown and we look at the hotels. The hotels are some of our highest property taxpayers, and the restaurants and the businesses. They're paying 135% of the residential property tax, because under the split rate they pay a higher tax rate. They are paying a lot of money in property taxes. We get the hotel, meal, and beverage tax revenue from the businesses that go on, but I think sometimes we don't remember, but the very buildings themselves are providing taxes to the city and property taxes, and they're providing employment, although in many instances they're necessarily high-end jobs. And I would suggest that the increase in enrollment at Pell is a consequence of the expansion of tourism downtown, and it's encouraged people to move to town who are willing to work in hotels as maids and housekeepers and maintenance people. They're not high-paying jobs, and we have to be realistic about that. But at the same time, that tourism it's paying an awful lot of the taxes. And if Newport suddenly didn't have hotels, I'm not sure that we could afford to live here. We had to pay the taxes needed, because the reality is our fire and our police department aren't necessarily sized that much. Our public safety isn't sized that much to the tourist population in the summer as it is to what they need to be throughout most of the year. So the fact that you have to drive to Middletown to work at Newark, or the fact that you have to drive to Quonset to work at Electric Boat, you don't always get to have all the jobs you want in the community that you live in. The fact that these good paying jobs are located nearby are something that we shouldn't lose sight of. And I'm not sure that at the end of the day, we're going to have a dramatic expansion of economic activity in the North End in a big, broad way. It's a possibility. It's probably at least 5 years away. It's going to take 3 or 4 years just to do the bridge ramp realignment. And with COVID, the impact on our economy, it's going to be a while before investors start lining up to make investments in town. And again, you're an investor. You come to Newport, and you're liable to ask 3 questions. How much tell me about your school system, tell me about the cost of your housing, and tell me about your communications. Do you have fiber optics available? Do you have have 5G in town? Where's the closest airport? What kind of transportation system do you have in place? Those are things that the city needs to be working on to make us more attractive to people with capital, to make them interested in investing in Newport.
Justin, with the North End, there could be some attractiveness there. If you were solely in charge, or if you were dreaming up your own little area up there in 10 years, if it was your choice, you got to say what was done there, what does the ideal North End look like 10 years from now for residents and businesses?
I get to do anything I want.
Yeah, whatever you think is right.
It's going to be interesting.
One of the things that I'm very proud of, you asked me about past accomplishments. I was an active member of the Citizens Concerned About Casino Gambling, and I'm very proud of the fact that we did something that caused the gambling function to move somewhere else. I didn't believe that it was the best thing for Newport, and it actually provides an opportunity, because now Copy and Outer can come in and do something on that property, or other people. If you did, I believe you sat through the North End Urban Plan briefing that NBBJ gave a couple of weeks ago, and they show us images of what the North End could look like with its complete streets and different types of zoning and the mixed use housing and business. One can have an imaginative moment and think, oh, that would be great if it could all look like that. I guess in my own mind, having some the Innovation Hub, as it was originally advertised, which in my mind would have been 6 businesses, in which businesses dealing with sea level rise and resiliency issues would concentrate here because of the Naval War College, Newark, and the University of Rhode Island, which I think that was the dream. That would have been great. I thought that was a good thing, because those would be high tech, good paying jobs, but a broad spectrum of job opportunities, and with low impact on the city. And they could have incorporated in that, some housing, And I realized, that's an area where if we could produce some workforce housing, that would be part of my imaginative future for that part of the city. All of that's going to take capital, and it's going to take investment by people who we have convinced that this is where they should invest their money. So we had Paul Carroll as our economic development person, and maybe he left too soon because we hadn't really closed the deal with anybody to make that economic development investment in the North End.
Excellent. Frank, good. Let's get us back on schedule so we don't have to have dinner here.
We're doing okay, yeah. So
we already out Chinese.
So when you look out at the next couple of years, what are your top priorities? 3 top priorities.
I've written them down, so I'm not going to change. I'm not going to change them on the fly. And I'm just, the first thing I think the council needs to do is elect an effective chair. If it were up to me, we'd have a charter change. We'd get rid of the term mayor because we don't have a mayor, and it confuses a lot of people. They think, oh, you've got a mayor. So they suddenly start talking to one person, when in fact you just have what is basically the chairman of the council or the president of the council. It is in many other communities. I've served through Steve Wallach twice, Jean Marie Napolitano twice, Harry Winthrop for 3 years. I think I may have been responsible in thrusting the responsibility of being chairman of the council on somebody before they were really ready to do it. So I think the first thing that needs to be done is we need to get an effective chair. And the reason I say that is we haven't done strategic planning. The city manager hasn't been evaluated since he was hired. And that's something that I advocated for over the last 2 years, but nothing against Joe as a person, but I never went 5 years without being evaluated, and evaluations were an important way for me to find out what my bosses thought about my performance and to guide me to do a better job going forward. So we haven't done that, and we should have done that in the last 2 years. And frankly, I think the budget process during this council term hasn't been as strong as it should have been. And so that would be, when the new council meets, if I'm on it, and don't ask me who I would support because I don't know what horses are going to be running at that point in time. But I think we need to, pick the person that can, get us moving forward on some of those issues. We need to do a better job on strategic planning and budget process and, with respect to the city manager. And the city manager's contract expires in June of 2022. He could ask for an extension of that contract, or he could say, hey, it's been a great run, but I won't, in which case this next council could actually have the responsibility of picking a new city manager. So anyway, that's number one. Number two deals with the North End Urban Plan implementation. It's an important thing that has tremendous potential for the future of the city because it has the opportunity to look at workforce housing as well as job generation. So we're in the early stages of it, but if you don't pay attention in the early stages, you don't have the foundation you need later on. So I think the council needs to work on that. And the last is that I don't think we've done a good job enforcing quality of life zoning ordinances in the city. And I'm not sure how you go about doing that, except maybe you just keep saying we need to do a better job. Noise, parking, traffic, whatever it is. If we have an ordinance that says people aren't supposed to be doing something, we should be enforcing them. And it's not a fun part of the job on the council is to have to tell residents that, no, I'm sorry, we didn't enforce that ordinance, and therefore you have that problem. We should be doing a better job of enforcing our zoning ordinances, particularly with those that relate to quality of life issues. So those are my three, high priorities.
Excellent. And I'll let everybody know this is our first video. We provided all of the candidates with a series of questions, but of course we've thrown in some follow-ups as well as some random questions. And here is a random question And if you were on this side of the table, what question would you like to see each candidate for city council answer, and why?
Wait, my worst dreams.
I can rephrase it. What question?
Go ahead.
Would you, I guess that is the question is, what do the voters?
What should a reporter be asking the candidates on the council? From your perspective, really, what have we missed, and what should we be asking the council candidates?
Well, it deals with process. I think that the process of government is extremely important, and there are probably ways to improve it. And so, and that's another thing that could happen in the next 2 years. It's been roughly 10 years since we did a charter review. So I would probably say, would you support doing a charter review in the next term? And what are some of the issues that you would like to see a charter review commission address if they were to do that? And, and under that, a number come to mind. I talked about, if the city of Newport wants to have a mayor form of government, then let's give them the opportunity to do that. But if we're not going to have a mayor, then let's get rid of the title so that there's no confusion about it. Secondly, I've always been a big fan of at-large counselors. They increased the number of at-large candidates a number of years ago to have a wider pool from which to select the chairman of the council. For a while, I believe that everybody should have been elected at large because there are no ward issues per se. At least that was my experience. Every councilor should be concerned about all the issues in the community. But I've come around to realize that in order to provide good representation to the entire city, maybe we should just go to having 7 wards where everybody's eligible to be the chair after the election, and then each unit of the city more closely gets an opportunity to select their representation. It is possible under the current system to have some segments of the city dominate who gets elected as at-large councilors, and maybe that's not such a good thing. And the third thing that I've always been in favor of would be, I think the council, in order to have greater ownership, sense of ownership in government, should have a sort of a advice and consent role in the appointment department heads in city government, and that would be the police chief and the fire chief, director of public services, public utilities, finance, to rattle off a few. I'm not saying that any of those people aren't doing a good job, but the council doesn't get any say in their selection, and I think it diminishes the council's sense of ownership of part of the city government, which would be better if they had a greater sense of ownership. Anyway, that's the question I'd ask her, and I just gave you my answer.
All right, so there it is. There is his answer as well as what question. We'll keep that one in there as well. And Frank, we missed anything? You have anything else here?
No, we have as a final question here, but I think you've really really addressed it. Is what do you love about Newport? Why do you call it home?
And there's just so much here, and there's so much opportunity to just get out and enjoy this community. Whether it's the history, the architecture, the fine dining and the not so fine dining that's just wonderful. Whether it's Bouchard's or the Corner Cafe, there's just an opportunity to just get out and enjoy yourself in this community. Because my wife may be listening, I'm gonna weave in one more thing, that we should work to encourage more family tourism in the community, because there's so much here for families to do. We ought to get more of them to come and visit us and do whatever we can to make family tourism a greater part of our tourism part, because this is a great place. And the interesting thing is that so many naval officers come here with their families, and because of the experience, this is where they end up retiring. I don't understand why people leave Newport. I think it's just such a great place to live.
Excellent, Justin. We've covered a lot. Oh, go ahead, Frank.
I was going to say that seems to be a great place to finish the interview.
It is, and we've covered a lot in 60 minutes. Anything else that we missed that you'd like to share today?
No, it's been an honor to serve on the council, and I hope nobody holds my age against me. I'll just be, I'll be thrilled if I get elected again, and I'm prepared to, give 2 more years of hard work to the city. And
so Justin, you know what the great Satchel Paige said about age. If you don't know how old you are, how old would you be? So there's the answer to age.
The bottom line is I don't feel old. I just feel I have a youthful attitude. So.
And Justin, if anybody wants to follow up with you to talk about any topic, get in touch with, a question, best way to get a hold of you.
My cell phone number is 447-8076. My email address is justin-at-large@cox.net. I answer phone calls. I answer emails. If it weren't for COVID, I'd say, come on over and we'll have a drink in the backyard and look at my flowers. But this COVID sucks, and I really haven't enjoyed a minute of it. And it's being on the council has been that much harder because of COVID. But I look forward to the days when we actually can get out and be amongst ourselves.
Mia as well, and we've enjoyed every minute that we've had with you. And what I want to do is just share one more time. I'm going to do this with everyone. Just a reminder, this is what the primary on September 8th looks like. This is for Ward 1. So if you're in Ward 1 in the city, you're going to be choosing from the councilors at large. You're going to be choosing up to 4 out of the 12 there. If you're in Ward 2, you're going to be doing the same. And then in Ward 3, you're going to be choosing from the 12 at large, as well as from 3. You're going to vote for 1 out of the Ward 3 election here. If you don't know what ward you live in, you can go to cityofnewport.com and you can find that information right on the website. So Justin is running for at large, but I just want to remind people it's important to go out in the primary, because we'll be narrowing it down from 12 to 8. So Justin, thank you so much for your time today, and we will catch up with you again very soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks for doing this.
Of course. And that is Justin McLaughlin, and he joined us today. And Frank Prosnitz, this is the first one, and we got it done in almost an hour.
And I thought we would get it done in a half hour, but what do I know? There's a lot to talk about, and I think actually the contrary to one email we received, I think the scope of questions are pretty good. And I would encourage those people who are running for office. We have had a lot of responses, and that's great. Take this seriously and give yourself an opportunity to come on and be able to talk about the things that you believe in, the things that are important to the city. And this is a great forum. There's one other point I want to make, if we can, for 1 second. We specifically chose not to be part of a conglomerate, if you will, in terms of doing these things for a specific reason. I've spent a lot of years in journalism. One of the things that has been that I valued most in terms of journalism is that each organization, each journalist comes at things a different way. And when we put it all together in one package, we don't have that. People don't have the advantage of having different thought going into these, going into the questions, going into the follow-up, and going into the analysis. So I'm really pleased that we're doing this, and I think it's just important that we do it, and I think it's important that others do it as well.
It is, and one of the things that we've done, which we may be crazy for doing, is we allow each candidate to come on here and spend as much time as they need answering each question. Sometimes answering a question in a minute or 30 seconds can leave candidates, how do you sum up some of the things that were discussed today in 30 seconds?
Sometimes the candidate will begin in a direction, and other things will come to mind, and other things get woven in, and you never get, if you really limit time, sometimes what you do is you don't get the answers, or you don't give that candidate the opportunity to be able to express their viewpoint totally.
Absolutely. And, we gave them some questions, and then what we do is we pivot and we ask some follow-ups as well as, so we have a full schedule coming up here, and we'll be updating it. If you visit whatsupnewp.com, you're going to see What's Up Newp's voter guide for Newport City Council. If you follow that story, we will be putting in the schedule for each candidate as they respond to us. We'll be embedding their videos there, so you can watch all the videos and compare each candidate there, as well as we have links out to their campaign announcement, as well as we link out to Alliance for Livable Newport survey that they did as well. We'll also be linking to a survey that each candidate answered for What's Up Newp. So lots of information there. No reason not to be informed if you live in Newport about who's running for Newport City Council. And we hope, if time allows, that we'll be able to cover some more races as well.
Very good.
All right, Mr. Prosnitz, that is going to do it for us here today.
Well, thank you, Ryan. I'll catch up with you later.
All right. On behalf of Frank Prosnitz, Ryan Belmore, and all of us here at What's Up Newp, thanks for watching. Again, if you missed any portion of this video, you can visit whatsupnewp.com. We have it live for you there. And you can compare, contrast, and get in touch with candidates. And we will chat with you soon. Thanks for watching.